Don't you hate people who are borrowers? I don't mean the guy who borrows $10 that he may or may not pay back, or the housewife who runs to her neighbor for a cup of sugar. I mean the guy who borrows your hammer and doesn't return it. So when you need it, you must track it down and pick it up. And you can't use your lawnmower because he borrowed it, and when you went and picked it up, it ran out of gas. This is George. He's a pretty nice guy. Quite handsome, at least that's what the women say. Quite smart and has great charm. It's that damn charm that allows him to borrow things from everyone instead of buying them himself. Speaking personally, I'm fed up with George and his borrowings. As a neighbor and one of his main victims, I was invited to a barbecue George was hosting one evening. The main reason I went was to make sure he would return my BBQ at the end of the evening. He is just as likely to lend it to someone else as to return it. I didn't currently have a girlfriend, but at the barbecue it didn't really matter. Men gathered in one area and women in another, and rarely did the two categories meet. A public event like this was also one of the few times we got to see Jennifer, George's wife. George says she is shy and doesn't like to go out often. I even suspected that she was someone else's wife, whom he borrowed and forgot to return. Jokes aside, I've met her before, but only for a minute or two. The only thing I knew about her was that she had an amazing figure. At any rate, George was lucky in this area. The evening continued. Wandering around the edge of the crowd, I accidentally bumped into Jennifer, who was left all alone for a short time. I said hello to her, and then I had to remind her who I was. Not very flattering for my vanity. I managed to get her to talk, and it was hard work. After a while, it began to dawn on me that Jennifer wasn't so much shy as she was just rather stupid. It seemed like every opinion she had was voiced by George. I persuaded her to walk around the yard with me, pointing out that I was a neighbor and that we should get to know each other better. At one point, I accidentally mentioned that the barbecue George was using was mine. Jennifer seemed to approve. George likes to borrow things, she told me. He says people have too much stuff and they don't use it enough. By borrowing things, George helps us use them the way they should be, and we don't have as much clutter in our home. George says borrowing is a good way to have things only when you need them. This is an unusual philosophy, I said. Most people like to own things. I understand George doesn't really believe in exclusive ownership of things. No. He says it's just helping the capitalist pigs get rich. Everything should be shared without any owners. It suddenly occurred to me that by pure chance, we had wandered into a small corner of the yard, which was fenced off from the main yard by an overgrown hedge. George probably couldn't borrow a few hedge trimmers. Seeing that we were alone and no one could see us, I decided to study George's borrowing philosophy. I take it George is also willing to lend some of his things that anyone might want to borrow? Jennifer nodded enthusiastically. Yes, of course he'll lend it. We don't actually have a lot of property, but people are free to borrow it if they need it. And does this apply to you? Jennifer nodded again. Certainly. I'd borrow anything. I do not mind. Then none of you will mind if I borrow you for a while, I said with a grin. Jennifer blinked. I guess not. But why do you want to borrow me? Well, I said, lazily reaching out my hand and touching it. I don't currently have a girlfriend and I miss her personal company. Maybe you could fill in for her for a short time. Jennifer looked adorable when she was confused. You mean like a girl? I started stroking her. It's right. You feel good about my touch, and I would really like to touch you a little more. Didn't George ever lend you to a friend? Jennifer shook her head, puzzled by the idea. Then her face brightened. Oh, I know what you mean. George sometimes courts Sally Hartwood when her husband is out of town. You mean something like that? George and Sally. It was interesting. Yes, something like that, I agreed. Jennifer smiled as she completed the puzzle. Then her face fell again. I don't really have time to go to your house and help you, she said sadly. George likes it when I stay home. It doesn't matter, I consoled her. I can borrow you right here for a few minutes. For a few minutes? I nodded. Look. I began to give her pleasure. Jennifer looked surprised, but not shocked. Are you doing this to your girlfriend? She asked. I nodded. And even more. We made love. After the incident, we returned to the barbecue. We were standing at the edge of the crowd again when George approached. I nodded to him. "Just borrow your wife for a few minutes," I told him. He nodded. "No problem," he said. "I always borrow something myself." I nodded in agreement, and he continued his walk. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.